Assalamu alaikum and welcome back after the summer holidays. Hope everyone had a really good summer break, Eid as well, and all the other stuff that happens thereafter, as well as observing Muharram. Now, as I say, hopefully back to the swing of things. Here it's the HISC Seerah session 120, half an Islam study circle. And we'll be talking inshallah about the Battle of the Trench. But just briefly before we go on to that, just quickly recapping some of the stuff that we've done previously. And we talked about last time some of the personal effects of the Prophet ﷺ, his family life. We talked about his wives, and again, just to go over it in terms of the list, so it sort of people can remember. Obviously, there's Khadija bint Khuwaylid, who he married in Mecca. Then afterwards, after she passed away, he married Sauda, Aisha, and then Hafsa, and then we'll get on to do Zainab, Salama, Zainab bint Jahsh. The first one was Zainab bint Khuzaima, Salama, Zainab bint Jahsh, Javeria, Ramla, Habiba, Safiya binti Huyay, and we'll talk about her father today, later inshallah, and then Maymuna. And whilst we're doing the lists, there's the Prophet ﷺ's children: Qasim, Zainab, Ruqayya, Kulthum, Abdullah, Fatima, and Ibrahim. So in the last session, just before the summer break, we talked about the Prophet ﷺ. This is post Uhud, after some of the massacres, and the Prophet ﷺ went and they invaded some of the tribes in the Najd, Banu Nadir and Thalaba, and then we talked about how just in terms of the chronology, the first year the Prophet ﷺ was in Medina. There's the constitution, building the mosque, getting the army, setting up the Brotherhood. The second year was the Battle of Badr. The third year, the main event, was the Battle of Uhud. The fourth year, the Battle of Badr II, which didn't happen. Some other minor things, and we'll come on to those controversies later. And then it's generally reported that the Battle of the Ditch, Battle of Khandaq, was in the fifth year of Hijrah. So the second Battle of Badr, so Badr won, Muslims overwhelmingly won. Uhud, second battle, call it a draw. Some say the Muslims lost, some say the Quraysh effectively lost. So they made, Abu Sufyan made a pact: let's come back the next year for a repeat of Badr. The Prophet ﷺ went out with 1,500 fighters, but Abu Sufyan's 2,500 people never turned up. Then we talked about the invasion of Dawmat al-Jandal on the borders of Syria, where the army used to march by night, hide by day, and took them by surprise. And then we did the expedition of the Rags, Dad al-Raqa, which some say happened much later on, others say put it sort of earlier on. This is the battle where Salat al-Khawf was revealed, and the Prophet ﷺ went with between 400 and 700 men. No fighting took place. They went to Banu, some of the Ghatafan tribes, and it was known as rags because they had to wrap rags on their feet. I mean, in one of the Sahabi, Abu Musa al-Ashri, he said that we were 6 to 1 camel, and we took our turn on the camel every sixth person, and then our feet got injured because we were walking so much, and his feet were so badly injured his nails came off, and they had to bandage their feet with rags. Hence, the expedition was called Dad al-Raqa. And in that, on the way back, the Prophet fell asleep under a tree, and a Bedouin came up, took his sword, and said, "Who's going to protect you from me?" And the Prophet said, "Allah." And then the chap fell back, and the Prophet picked up the sword and said to the Bedouin, "Who's going to protect you from me?" And he goes, "Like you're better than I." And then we talked about the story of Abad bin Bishr, who was told by the Prophet to stay up and guard the encampment at night, and whilst he was praying, he got shot by an arrow, didn't stop praying, got shot by another, pulled it out, got shot by another arrow, and then another arrow, and then only when he thought he was going to faint, he woke up Ammar bin Yasir and said, "Look, you need to take over because that might flake out a bit." And he said, "Look, I was told by the Prophet to guard my opening, the thugr, and I swear, were it not for the fact that I felt I would have failed in that duty, I would have carried on in my salah." And I was reciting a particularly beautiful surah. So, and then we finished off with the hadith of Jabir, and obviously Jabir's importance is that he's one of the in the top 10 of people who narrate hadith. Obviously, number one way out in front is Abu Huraira, over 5,000 hadith, and there's the son of Umar ibn Khattab, Ibn Umar, 2,500, over 2,500, then Anas bin Malik, Aisha, Ibn Abbas, and Jabir ibn Abdullah, and then other notable people we know of like Sa'id al-Khudri, Abu Sa'id al-Khudri, Ibn Masud, and Abdullah ibn Amr al-As. So these are the giants who've narrated lots of hadith. And the story of Jabir coming back from one of the expeditions, recently got married, sitting on a week-old camel, looking depressed. The Prophet tries to cheer him up, have a chat with him, and then basically goes through some a charade, essentially just saying, "I'm going to buy your camel when we get back," and then they agree a price, and then when he gets back, the Prophet calls him over, and Jabir gives him the camel, and the Prophet says, "Look, I'm not going to cheat like your camel. Take your camel and take the money that I was going to give you anyway." So lots of stuff that we can learn from that. So that's sort of catching up to where we are at the moment. A couple of other things just to mention is that there are a couple of other stories which we're not sure, the books of hadith and Seerah aren't unanimous in terms of when they happened. So for example, the expedition of al-Farsi and Banu Nadir, some say these happened before the Battle of the Trench, some say they happened after the Battle of the Trench, and it's important because Banu Nadir and al-Farsi, on the way back, that's where the slander of Aisha happens, the ifk, and then there's lots of issues around the munafiqeen there, the suspicions and the slander and the eventual vindication. So some of the books of hadith, they put it before the trench, but we'll probably do it after the trench because my main source for the Seerah is the sealed nectar Mubarak Puris, and in that he puts it after the Battle of the Trench. So we'll talk about that later on, inshallah. So moving on to that in a second. Just turning that on airplane mode. So the Battle of the Ditch, the Khaybar, also known as the Battle of the Confederates, al-Ahzab. Confederates, it's a sort of an old term. It's a group of tribes coming together. We would, there's a confederacy in sort of US Civil War history, but a confederation of tribes coming together. In our parlance, we would probably call it the Allies. So an allied invasion. So lots of different tribes allied together, forming a confederacy, Confederates, and seeking to attack the Prophet and attack Medina as a confederacy, as an allied movement the grouping of the allies. It's also called the Battle of Khandaq, the ditch, because this is the famous story of where Salman al-Farsi recommended building a ditch as a protective measure, and we'll talk about that shortly, inshallah. So just rewinding, what was the reason for the battle? Who started it? So there's been sort of a level of quiet in and around Medina, a period of peace, you could say. The Quraysh, they chickened out of the second Badr, and they're realizing that they're not in a very strong position. So they're just biding their time, and they're hoping some of the other Arab tribes will take care of the Prophet ﷺ, or they're just trying to ignore the new geopolitical reality. But the expelled tribes from Medina, they are not having it. So the Prophet ﷺ, he'd expelled Banu Qaynuqa, and more importantly Banu Nadir, much larger tribe than Qaynuqa. Now these both tribes happen to be Jewish, and they were, along with Banu Qurayza, the three main Jewish tribes, and they'd all entered into an agreement at the beginning with the Prophet ﷺ to defend Medina, and not to ally with the opponents of the Prophet ﷺ. So this was in the constitution. And then we talked about how Banu Qaynuqa, they broke their pledges, and they were very hostile to the Muslims. And then the incident where they abused a Muslim woman, and then a Muslim man came to her defense and killed the shop owner, and then he subsequently was killed. And then on the back of that, Banu Qaynuqa and the hostility that they openly had to the Prophet ﷺ, because he'd set up a rival market, and most of the new trade was going there. So Banu Qaynuqa were expelled. Then after that, Banu Nadir. So Banu Nadir, they were asked, look, stick to the plan, and they said fine. And then when the Prophet ﷺ went to get some support from them for paying for the blood money, some of them, including Khaybar bin Akhtab, they said, we've got him now, he's sitting outside our fort, let's get a boulder and just roll it on top of him, and he's going to die. And there was some arguing amongst the chieftains of Banu Nadir, but in the end they acquiesced to this plan to assassinate the Prophet ﷺ when he'd come there on a peaceful mission. And the Prophet ﷺ was tipped off by Jibril, obviously, got up and walked away. Then he went back to Banu Nadir and said, look, you broke the treaty. Things are null and void. You've got fixed time, and you need to leave. And they said, okay, fine. And then Abdullah ibn Ubay al-Salul, he went back to them and said, no, you can't leave, I'm going to stick with you, and we'll get some other tribes, Ghatafan, to come and support you, and we'll defend you, and we'll fight together against this Muhammad. And then they changed their mind, said, okay, fine, we'll stay. Then the Prophet ﷺ, he said, fine, this is war. He marched out and he laid siege to the fortresses of Banu Nadir, and then part of that, he went from Banu Nadir back to Banu Qurayza and said, look, reaffirm your pledge, and that you're in agreement with what we've already agreed, that you're not going to break the agreement that you made, and you're going to defend the Muslims, you're not going to turn against us, you're not going to support our enemies. Banu Qurayza said, yeah, we're with you. And that's important because it lays the context for their utter betrayal during Khandaq, during the Battle of the Ditch. So then the Prophet, he goes back, and then he's laying siege to Banu Nadir a couple of weeks, and then starts burning their palm trees, and then they decide to surrender. And generously, the Prophet says, okay, fine, go, leave, take with you whatever you can apart from your weapons, right? and so they, they put all their stuff on their camels and they leave with their wealth. So Banu Nadir, they're quite wound up. They want to have their property back. They want to take revenge on the Prophet ﷺ. They were humiliated, even though some of them went to Khaybar, some of them went elsewhere. They're in a situation where their pride has been severely affected. They've been humiliated. So the leaders of Banu Nadir in exile, they send an official delegation to Mecca, and they know they're going to have a pleasant audience with the Quraysh in Mecca. So official delegation of the seniors of Banu Nadir, who've still got all their wealth and their contacts, and some of their reputation. So they go, and they know they've got the backing of Khaybar. Now Khaybar is the biggest Jewish settlement where the Jewish tribes are, and in fact, again, we'll come on to this in a second. When Salman al-Farsi was being sent by his bishop, the last bishop, to say, go to the land of the Arabs where the date palms are, you will find the Prophet there. He was on his way to Khaybar when he got, again, captured, sold into slavery, and then ended up in Medina. But Khaybar is the biggest area where the Jewish tribes are settled. So this official delegation from Banu Nadir, they go with their seniors to the elders of the Quraysh. In that delegation is Huyay bin Akhtab, the father of Safiya. Safiya later on marries the Prophet ﷺ, and we'll talk about the story of Safiya later. Now, so they went to the Quraysh and they said, look, let's cooperate and simultaneously, that's the Confederacy, the Allies, attack the Prophet ﷺ. And on top of that, so they said, we will give you all the money you need. We will finance this invasion. We will give you the money. We'll in fact give you half the harvest of dates from Khaybar, right? And this is almost like manna from heaven from the Quraysh. I mean, they were just sat around. They weren't expecting this, and then suddenly somebody comes and offers to pay them and give them dates to go and attack the Prophet ﷺ and the Muslims. This is something that they, with all the humiliation that they've had, that this is something they desperately want. Now they Banu Nadir have come up with a plan to do this, and so they've got the money, they're financing it. They just need the manpower that the Quraysh can help muster to be part of the plan. So they have this conversation about Abu Sufyan. He can't believe his luck. Fine, let's sort this out. So what Safwan and other chiefs of the Quraysh, they swear a solemn oath inside the Kaaba. They take the Jews inside the Kaaba and say that they will not fail each other until they've achieved their end and their aim, which is obviously to get rid of the Muslims and the Prophet ﷺ once and for all. And they're looking to finance an army the likes of which has never been seen or heard of in the Arabian Peninsula before. And in the end, they got 10,000 people in their confederacy, in their allies, 10,000, which is huge. So they swore this solemn oath, but one thing really sort of niggled at the back of Abu Sufyan. Now, they know the Jewish people to be people of wealth, of power, of intellect, of civilization and of scripture. So he says, look, Abu Sufyan, once they've agreed this and they know that they're all in it together, he said, look, you're the people of the first scripture and you have knowledge. Tell us, in all honesty, how do we stand with regards to Muhammad? Is our religion better or is his? So they're basically saying, look, you've got the religion, you've got the prophets, you claim to worship one God. We're polytheists, where we know where we come from. We're idol worshippers, and we know that. We're proud of that. Yet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, he claims to follow your God. He claims, to be in your line of prophethood. And so, tell us in honesty, who's closer to the truth? Is it us guys as polytheists, or is it Muhammad? And so the Jewish elders, the rabbis there, they said, look, your religion is better than his, and you are nearer the truth than he is. I mean, just completely flat out lying. But it just goes to show the depth of their hatred of the Prophet ﷺ, and the fact that their tribalism, their nationalism could not accept the fact that Allah would choose a non-Jew, an Arab, all people, to carry the last call. And so this is, utter tribalism, utter nationalism. And, they just sort of, said, whereas the Jewish faith and the Muslim faith overlap in so many ways, most fundamentally this thing about monotheism, but he's just lying straight out to Abu Sufyan and says, look, your way's better. And then Allah exposes this in the Qur'an, in Surah An-Nisa, verse 51, in translation, have you not seen those who were given a portion of the scripture, who believe in superstition and the false objects of worship, and say about the disbelievers, these are better guided than the believers as to the way. Allah exposes them straight out. This is complete fallacy. Anyway, so they've agreed a tactical plan. They're going to go away. They're going to raise the funds to finance. They're going to approach sympathetic tribes to be part of this confederacy, to be part of this allied invasion. So the Jewish tribes, they took up and they went to gather some of the nomads, the Bedouins of the Najd, who had grievances against the Prophet ﷺ. Because his reach now extended into the Najd, and they knew who these tribes were, who were against the Prophet ﷺ, and how their existence and had been affected negatively by the Prophet ﷺ, because these guys, they're into plundering, banditry, robbery, and the Prophet ﷺ, he's establishing order amongst all that chaos, and they don't like it. So they go to Bani Asad, and they readily agree, and to Bani Ghatafan, they agree to give the other half of the harvest of Khaybar, right? So again, this is a huge wealth. This is currency in those dates, of currency. So half the wealth of Khaybar to Ghatafan, and they'd already promised some of the harvest to the Quraysh. So come join this allied invasion confederacy, and they agreed. Nearly 2,000 men. So this is roughly the fighting men of Medina. So the Ghatafan tribes of Fazara, Murrah, and Ashja. So the Jewish tribes also managed to get a contingent from Bani Sulaim, 700 strong or so. Would have been larger, but another portion of Banu Sulaim had broken off and were allied to the Prophet ﷺ. The Bani Amr, who remained steadfast to their agreement with the Prophet ﷺ, their pact, and this was following the massacre of Bir Ma'una. So a large contingent from the Najd coming. So the Najd armies would advance at a preset time and make their way towards Medina from the east. The Quraysh themselves, 4,000 strong, right? They would march from the south and they would approach Medina from the west. And we talked about the fortifications of Medina. So they're going to use the same route as they took on the way to Uhud, but they would sort of meet up there. And again, the fortifications, the natural fortifications of Medina meant that the volcanic tract on the east, the volcanic tract on the west provided natural protection. Armies cannot readily cross, these volcanic areas. The sharp, jagged, landscape is not easy to traverse. Likewise, from the south, you've got the swamps and the date palms, and again, it's difficult to get, a few thousand army, let alone 10,000, approaching from that side. So they had to approach from the north, and now 10,000 strong. They knew that they were outsmarted in the Battle of Uhud, where the Prophet he went out first and he camped outside and challenged them to fight on Uhud rather than in Medina. This time round, they're not going to take the chance. They're going to try and surprise him, but such an overwhelming army, 10,000 strong, cannot fight on those plains, and they are hell-bent on attacking and destroying the whole city. And they're not taking any chances. This is literally what we call an existential threat to the state of Medina. No qualms about it. This 10,000 strong army are there to annihilate, eradicate the Muslims once and for all, right? Then this is a fighting force that's 3 times the size of Uhud. And again, the Muslims aren't, in their number, aren't going to be, they're going to be taken by surprise. They're not going to be that many more than they were beforehand. So this plan is quite severe. Never, and I've said this before, never have the Arab tribes ever united like this, right? So there's essentially 2 unifications amongst the Arab tribes. There are those that united with the Prophet ﷺ, and then there are these Confederacy allies who are united against the Prophet ﷺ, right? And so you're getting the battle line drawn so starkly. So they're marching these 10,000 strong. So as they're leaving Mecca, we know that word gets to the Prophet ﷺ. Now, we know he's got his scouts, his intelligence services all over the place. One theory is that Abbas, who is still in Mecca, who tipped the Prophet ﷺ off about Uhud, he dispatched a number of horsemen from Banu Nadir, who went in hell for leather, get to Medina within 3 or 4 days, and told them this is the plan. Or he got his other intelligence from his other sources, but essentially the Prophet has been told this is where the tribes are coming from this side and from this side. You've only got a week to make preparations. So this is huge. Like I said, this is an existential threat. This is the actual possibility of the Muslims being wiped off, and the end of the Islamic State, right? I mean, it's not like the so-called existential threats that we have, where in modern day, where everything is a huge security threat, and everything has to be hyped up to that level to allow our government to impose strict security and surveillance and suspend their laws, especially when it comes to the Muslims that we find nowadays. This is like proper existential threats. So where you really do have the chance of being wiped off. Okay, not just rhetoric. So the Prophet, he's got a week to make preparations. He knows where the army is and what needs to be done. So he, like he did before, he gathers a shura, makes consultation. Now, there's little option, in terms of there aren't many suggestions about what we should do. This is a really dire situation, and we know this from the books of Hadith, because the actual conversation is not really recorded. People are essentially in stunned silence. What do we, 2,500 people, do against 10,000? How can we defend the city? And we've only got a week to do it. How do we do? How do we do this? And then we know the famous story of Salman al-Farsi, him standing up, rising to his feet and saying, "O Messenger of Allah, in Persia, where he's originally from, when we feared an attack of the horse, we would surround ourselves with a trench. So let us dig a trench around us now." This is new technology. This is not something that the Arabs are used to, but this seemed like a really sensible idea in a very desperate situation. What other choice do they have? And the fact that the strategic environs of Medina, volcanic tract, date palms and marshes, means that actually this is actually quite feasible. We don't need to dig a trench all the way around the city. We just have to identify vulnerable strategic points and dig the trench there, which is essentially the north of Medina, plus a few other extra places. And we've talked about the story of Salman al-Farsi before. I'm not going to go into it in any detail, but just to remind us, he was Persian. He grew up in Persia, came across some Christian monks. His father was Zoroastrian, fire worshipper. He decided, actually, I don't like the sound of that. Came across some genuine Christian monks, and then started following them. And then, he went from there to some bishop who sent him to another bishop. And one of the bishops he didn't like because he was siphoning off some of the wealth. And then he went to another bishop, and then was explained sort of real Christianity. So there, he would say, look, not following the Nicene Creed, there is a different version of Christianity that is true to the original teachings of Christ. We've long lost that. But if you want, you can go to such and such a bishop who, on the face of it, preaches the normal, accepted Christianity, but is a true believer. So Salman al-Farsi goes there, and then as he's dying, he sends him off to somewhere in Turkey and says, actually, this is the very last person who I know believes in this way of these teachings of Christ. So he goes there. That chap is dying now after many years, and Salman al-Farsi is an old man, and that man is dying, and says, look, you really want to follow these true teachings? There's no other bishops that I know who know what I know. Follow what I follow. Your best chance is to go to the land of the Arabs, the land of the dates, where they are expecting to have the final prophet being sent. These are his signs. This is what you must look out for. So he sells everything, and he's going over to the land of the dates, heading towards Khaybar. and then he gets tricked by some travellers who say, "Are you going that way?" And they say, "Yeah, we're going that way. Come along with us." And then he goes along with them, and then they basically just tie him up and sell him as a slave, and he ends up in Medina with Yathrib at the time. And then he hears the story of this prophet coming, and he's just really anxious. He's on the top of the tree. And then he's the Prophet enters into Medina, in the early days. He's looking around to see where is, there are three signs. One is the land of the date palms. One is he'll have a mark on his back, the seal of prophethood between his shoulder blades, and the third one is that he will accept gifts but not charity. So, Salman al-Farsi, tick, land of the dates. Tick, he saw the seal of prophethood, which is a little sort of birthmark between his shoulder blades. Prophet lowered his shirt so he could see that. And the third one, Salman al-Farsi says, "Look, here you go. Here's some charity for you." The Prophet took it, didn't eat it, gave it to his Sahabi. The next day he says, "Here, I bring the gift for you." And the Prophet ate it and shared it with his Sahabi. And then he broke down and told him his story. And the Prophet said, "Look, tell the story you told me to everyone else." And then he told that story to everyone else. But he's a slave, and he wants to serve the Prophet. So news now gets out that he wants to become a Muslim. So the Prophet says, "Buy your freedom," but his Jewish owner knows the fact that actually he's of a high value target now. So he raises his price to a ridiculous amount and says, "Look, you give me I can't remember so many date palms fully grown, and then I'll give you your freedom." So he works, gets the seedlings for the date palms. The Prophet says, "When you collect them, come to me and I will plant them." And the Prophet individually planted them all. They all grew up quickly and started bearing dates. Then he got his freedom. So this is a few years down now, 4 or 5 years later. He's telling the people, "This is what we used to do in Persia." Now, so the Prophet likes the idea, and they start. He allocates 10 men to each portion to start digging. Now, we don't know how long the trench is. Some say it's 2 kilometers. Some say it's 12 kilometers. 2 kilometers. Still, it's a huge trench. They have to dig this in a week. And it's 13 feet wide, 4 or 5 meters deep, maybe. As I say, or some say it's 12 kilometers in just over a week. And with 2,500 men working day and night around the clock in shifts, they have to build it. So whether it's 2 or 12, excuse me, 2 kilometers. That's essentially from the top of Gilhurst Road all the way to where George and Helen's chip shop is. So all of Gilhurst Road, all of Croftdown Road, all the way Court Oak Road to that roundabout there, where George and Helen's is. That's 2 kilometres. Or put another way, it's from the top of Gilhurst Road all the way to Five Ways. So Westbourne Road, Augustus Road, all the way Harborne Road to Five Ways. That's 2 kilometres. Okay, that's how much they had to dig in a week, and this is wide enough that horses cannot jump, or they can't scale it with ladders. So it's got to be deep, it's got to be very wide. So that's 2 kilometres. So if you think about 12 kilometres, that's a phenomenal amount of digging. But anyway, that's what they had to dig. And there are plenty of stories, and we'll come on to that inshallah next week, of a lot of the miracles associated with the digging. So not just the visions and the prophecies of the Prophet, but the food. I mean, there was a food shortage. This was winter. It was biting cold, and they're working in Medina. And if you've been blessed enough to go to Medina, and if you've been in the winter time, you know how cold it can get, especially at night time in Fajr time. So biting cold, and they have to dig around the clock, and they don't have enough food either. This battle took place in winter. They weren't prepared for a siege. They only had a week to prepare to dig the moat, and they didn't have enough time to stock up on their food. And the fact that they're under attack and they're laid siege means they're not able to buy, sell, no commerce, no trade, no selling. So they've got limited supplies. And again, because it's winter, they're already into their winter food supply. So they hadn't banked on being attacked. So they've got their harvest and they know what to expect to get them through winter, but that's in normal trading conditions. Now they're under attack, and as I say, they're going to be laid siege to. So this is a really tough time. And again, there are a lot of miracles around some food-related miracles. So it's not just Isa alayhi salam with his fish and bread that do the food miracles. But just rolling back a little bit, an important lesson here from Salman al-Farsi's intervention. It's key. So the Prophet ﷺ, he makes shura. He takes consultation on a matter of general import, and we talked about that in the Battle of Uhud. But here you've got him taking technical advice and adopting technical advice from Salman al-Farsi. Now, there's an important distinction here that we should be aware of. We should be know the difference between taking technical advice around technology and innovation, as opposed to taking ideas related to Aqidah, right? And again, we've done study circle of this in the past, the difference between Hadara and Madaniya, culture and aspects of civilization, technology. So, aspects related to technology, things which do not have a specific cultural or ideological aspect, the Muslims can adopt those. Things which ideologically, from their root, come from specific ideas that may contradict Islam, and in themselves are ideas which contradict Islam, we cannot take. Aspects of technology which in themselves are neutral, right? Even though they may come from a foreign civilization, but if they're aspects of civilization, technology advancement, we are allowed to take. So this technological innovation around building a trench, we can take. And again, this goes back to the fact that Islam never has had this dichotomy between Islam and science. Religion versus science that the Christians have had. Islam has always embraced science, embraced technology, embraced advancement like that. Okay. However, not all technology can be accepted, can be adopted, because those aspects of technology which go against Islam and bases of Islam are difficult for us to adopt. And again, there's some medical advances nowadays which, although are technological, go against the fundamentals of Islam. Cloning, for example. Some would say test tube babies when you've got surrogacy involved, okay, a third party. So these are technological advances, but they contradict aspects of Aqidah or aspects of basics of Islam. Taking ideas, foreign ideas, again, that's very different to taking technological aspects. So foreign ideas which are alien to Islam, these should not be adopted. Unfortunately, nowadays, the Muslim Ummah has adopted lots of foreign ideas, right? Doesn't mean we should, but they have. But we should be clear what things we can adopt, what things we can't adopt. Foreign ideas, for example, some would say ideas of democracy where people legislate. This is an alien concept to the Muslims. It comes originally from the Greeks. People power. This is a foreign idea. So we need to discuss whether or not, as Muslims, we can adopt that idea. But when it comes to technology, is voting allowed? Yeah, of course voting is allowed. It's a tool, okay? Aspects of technology, like the Prophet ﷺ, he took technological advancements. So this is one aspect of it that he accepted. Another technological idea that's not related to a culture that gives rise to it, sending letters. So he would send letters to the other emperors bearing his wax seal. So people said, look, you cannot say other emperors and kings will not accept a letter from you unless it's got a wax seal. So then he commissioned a ring with his wax seal, which and we've all seen pictures of that where it says Allah, Rasul, Muhammad. Okay, that was his seal. So these are things that technological advances that he adopted, and and that's that's not related to a particular worldview. That's just a technological advancement, like using paper, like these other things. You get the picture. So it's important that we are able to take technological advancements, technological advice, and use it as long as it doesn't contradict Islam. So that's the idea to build the trench. So again, there's some discussion whether it was just one long trench, 2 kilometers, 12 kilometers, or if it was essentially one big trench, but then it joined up certain fortresses or natural defenses. So some big rocks. There's Mount Sal, which is a sort of a big rock formation. The trench would go up until there and then would continue on the other side of that. So these entrenchments would take into account some of the other natural fortifications, big fortresses, or these big houses. But either way, they're not going to leave a big enough gap for hundreds or thousands of soldiers to come through, right? So the idea is to fortify it, enough to an extent where you're not going to get 10,000, army strong walking through, because they know if these 10,000 they walk through, they will demolish everything in sight. There'll be hard fighting, but even guerrilla warfare is not going to be able to counter weight 10,000 who are hell bent on basically flattening everything. Okay. So that's that. And Rasul, he's having to think about that, and he's thinking about where do I place the women, and then there's stories of we'll talk about next week, inshallah, where the women folk go. Also, Inshallah, next week we'll talk about how the Prophet he mucked in. You know, the singing, the chanting, the digging the trench, all of that we'll talk about next week, inshallah. And the treachery that Banu Qurayza played in all of this, again, inshallah, that will come to light next week or the week after. So I'll finish there, inshallah. The sun has set. It's going to be Maghrib time soon, imminently. So I'll finish there. Inshallah, next week to carry on with the Battle of the Ditch, the Khandaq, or the Ahzab, the Confederacy, the Alliance. So do remember me in your du'as. Do remember the Ummah in your du'as especially. And do ask any questions if you feel free. Share, subscribe, all that sort of stuff. So take care, inshallah. Bismillah. والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. So take care, everyone, and there you go, the evening time. So, Assalamu alaikum.